Hello? Hello?
Hi, I can hear you. I just have myself muted.
Hi.
Hi,
This is Felicia from Woodstock 104.
it is not. I'm in the meeting about police reform.
What meeting is this?
It's about police reform in the town of Woodstock.
Right.
You're in the right place.
And is the public part of the meeting? I mean, as far as listening?
As far as I know, yeah, I don't have any title. I'm just here to see what's going on.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Can anybody hear me?
Well, I hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, this is Jacqueline Manganaro. I just saw a note saying that the host is waiting to let you in, so I guess we're waiting for the host.
This is Ashley from Supervisor McKenna's office. You're already in the meeting, so you shouldn't need to do anything further. Just listen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
welcome.
Ashley. Thanks,
You're
Ashley.
welcome.
So how many of us are here?
So far, I have 5 people in. We're waiting on some of the other committee members.
Okay. Thanks, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Ashley,
Yes.
this is Jacqueline Manganaro. I didn't receive an email from you for this meeting. I had to go through Reggie.
Okay, I can add you. Did you want the invitation regularly?
Yes, please. The
Sure.
link and
Sure, I'll add you to the list and then you'll get it. I send it out in the morning on the day of the meeting.
great. Thank you, Ashley. I filled out the survey last week.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I have your email address, but I'll double check that to make sure I have the right one.
Okay, if not, let me know. I'll give it to you.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. I'm Jackie. Hey, Reg.
Hey, Jackie.
You look different.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
in a good way.
Okay.
I talked to Ashley. She was on about getting the emails.
Okay, great.
I just don't want you all to see the way I'm looking right now. That's why my video's off.
All good. You got a dancing machine in the video over there?
Are you talking to me?
No,
Oh.
we have a pop-up dancer. Okay, Rachel's here. Is John on? Anybody know?
Yeah, I'm here, Reggie.
Okay, hey John.
Okay.
Hey Rachel. Chief.
Good afternoon, Reggie. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Hey, Clayton, Jackie Manganaro.
Hi, Jackie. How are you?
I'm well, and you?
Doing good.
Good.
So I think
How's
that's
everyone
everybody.
else?
Because John is here. Vanya and Anula aren't going to be able to join us today. Vanya, I don't know if she sent any, I don't think she emailed, but she sent me a text, and Anula texted everybody. And I sent an agenda. I'm sorry, I explained in the email, but Tam and I weren't able to connect until just before this meeting, but I did send that out to the committee. Okay, so Tam, why don't we get started?
All right, so we thought we'd do another grounding. So just wherever you are in your space, feel your feet on the floor. Deep breath in, slow breath out. Connecting with where you are and who you are on the planet. Let's take another deep breath in and out. And then coming back to the room with all our good intentions, our whole selves, and the purpose that we're here for. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Tam, for leading us through that. So let's start off with, we talked last week about, and I think Rachel brought this up, discussing data and from the survey. And we're going to talk about this afterwards, but everyone is not, like Tam is not able to access the survey. I'm going to work with Ashley to get that to her tomorrow because she hasn't been able to access the document through Gmail. And everyone else, I'm assuming, has been able to. Has anyone else had any issues with accessing it from the committee? I'm going to take that as a no.
I don't have access to it at this very moment, but I
Okay.
also, if I know that Anula had sent the buckets that we were talking about, and I wonder if we might consider doing that before we start going through the survey, like so that we have somewhere to put it.
Yeah, so that's something we're going to come up. That's going to come up a few bullets down. But yes, we're going to discuss buckets and getting clarity around that. Did anyone want to share anything that was coming up for them as far as any red flags or anything that was jumping out at them reading through the survey so far?
I mean, there was definitely a bunch of things that were coming out, and I think we should sort of maybe go through them together because we have been doing a lot of sort of glazing over stuff. So if we could actually address these and maybe go through them together, that would feel good. The only thing that I'm thinking, and again, I know this is whatever, maybe I'm asking for a vote. Can we discuss and address what those buckets are, where we'll be putting this information as we're discussing it, rather than discuss it and then address what the buckets are?
Rather than discuss what, the survey, you
I'm
mean?
asking for a vote.
You're asking for a vote on, I just want to get clear, I'm sorry, can you?
A few minutes ago, if we could actually discuss the buckets before we discuss what's in the survey, and that was shut down. So now I'm asking for an actual vote so that we can, I'm asking for our committee to vote on if we can actually discuss the buckets so we have an idea of where these things are going, and we actually have a container first before we look through the document. And then I'm asking for us to look through the document together, like to look through that spreadsheet. And real quickly, we can skim it, but yes, I'm asking for a little more detailed look at that at some point.
Yeah, that's on the plan for today, to come up, to narrow down, to talk about the buckets as a group.
Right. So can we do that like now? And then I'm not talking about who's going to be manning them. I understand that part. But
Yeah.
have we narrowed down the places that we will be placing these as we're talking now and taking those notes so that we have those containers and we know that we've created them?
Yeah,
Or
that's the plan.
and then
Today.
wait, I'm just asking if anybody else feels that besides, because you only answered me and we didn't actually get a response from the rest of the group at that time frame.
Okay, rest of the group.
Yeah, I think Rachel's just talking about moving the buckets up the agenda to number 1, which I don't have a problem with.
And I had thought, Rachel, that last week you asked us to go over some of the data first. And so I had put that first on the agenda, and I may have misunderstood the order that you were recommending last week. We have a couple of other things around the data survey. We mentioned last week that there are some interns who want to work on this with us and compile all the data into a presentation. And that presentation then would go into would be given to the town board, to this committee, and then also to the community at large. And Reggie mentioned that I haven't been able to look at the whole data, and we're missing Anula and Vanya right now. So it was not our intention to finalize anything without those two key members. It was our intention to go over the different components, starting with the survey, and just asking for people to let us know if there were anything that popped out for them or were red flags for them, recognizing that we haven't all gone through all of the data at this point, and then to begin to look at the buckets that Anula laid out and consolidate them into a little more concise, so we can begin to do that work.
Yes, thank you, and excuse me for stepping into that there.
That's okay, Rach.
But if you haven't looked at those document fully yet, should we, maybe one of us, put it up on the thing, and should we just go through it together, or should we wait for Anula for something deeper than that?
Anula and Vanya. So when Reggie and I talked earlier today, we thought that we would have this preliminary discussion and then be able to look at it more fully, or at least get feedback from Anula and Vanya over the week, and then start to look at the dates in January when we're going to have this presentation. And
makes sense. Okay. I'm
Thanks.
gonna say I don't have the document in front of me, and I'd rather not discuss the red flags without the whole group.
Okay.
Personally.
Yeah, that was our thinking too, that we needed the whole group.
Agreed. Okay, so Tam, do you want to talk now about the intern project and survey presentation?
I have a second-year graduate student, social work graduate student, who is willing to work on this over the next few weeks and take all the data and compile it into a presentation then for the board, this committee, and for the community at large. And we were thinking that that could happen over the next few weeks, and we could schedule these presentations for the beginning of January. So we wanted to know if people thought the first week of January or the second week of January, if that made any difference in this presentation. And my thinking was the second week, but that's just because I'm looking out for my intern and the fact that she might need a little bit more time to put this together. She's a parent and it's the holidays. So we just wanted to open that up. And we also want Vanya and Anula to have a say in this as well. So we wanted everybody to think about that. And next week we would finalize the dates for that. And then I can get Marissa started on the data compilation and a presentation of that.
And I'd have to check with Ashley and Bill as far as on the town end, as far as setting up something. It might not be at our regular time. It might be like an evening. But what I could do, or have Ashley do, is send out a doodle poll to get the committee to make sure that the majority of the committee is present. Hopefully everybody can make it, but to make sure we could all be there. So I'll coordinate with Ashley and Bill to see what's available on the town schedule. Actually, Bill is here today. Hi, Bill. And so I can coordinate that on the town end in conjunction with the committee members.
What are you looking to coordinate?
The presentation of the survey results.
Okay. That would be to the town board?
I think you maybe yes.
I was on the phone.
You're on the phone, yeah. So we can talk about it. We're gonna have the committee, I'm gonna send out a doodle poll and see what works for them. And then I'll coordinate with you and Ashley into this coming week to see what works as far as the town.
How soon do you think, are we talking this month or next month?
January.
So the 12th and the 19th are regular meetings. We will have an organizational meeting at the beginning, but that wouldn't be appropriate. So the 12th would be a very empty meeting, would be ideal for this. We could really just focus almost solely on this.
Okay.
Is that doable?
We want to wait to hear from everyone first, from the committee, but that I can in the poll send that date out, and then we could talk about an alternate date if for some reason that doesn't work for the majority of the committee.
And I'm guessing we're still all going to be, I'm assuming we're going to be meeting by Zoom well into the spring. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
This presentation of the collected data that's coming from your intern, you're talking about the presentation of when they will present it to us, and then we will come together and present it to the community, or we're all getting it together? Because I also kind of wonder, obviously we'll be talking about it and going through that between now and then. What is that specific presentation?
That'll be the data, compiled data, and any other analysis that she can do. If you have suggestions on analyses that you'd like to be part of this, that would be great. She does now have until, I think, it's looking like at least the 12th of January, so a month to look at this. And yes, we will still, as a group, be talking about it. This is the formal presentation to the board, to the public at large, that we're looking at more specifically. And anybody else that anybody on the group thinks we need to make a presentation to. And certainly that presentation can come to us as well, although we will be diving into that in our own ways before then.
Right, and so this person is creating a presentation from what they got from the survey and their analysis of our meetings, or
no, just the survey data.
Just the survey data.
Yeah. Do you have any other suggestion around it, Rach?
No, I'm just wondering. I'm just trying to understand it. I don't mean to block us up. I'm just trying to clarify.
Okay. And we still have this week because we want to get feedback from Anula and Vanya as well. We've discussed decision-making policy before, so we want feedback from everybody. And so if anybody has additional thoughts about how they would like to see this presented, or pieces of it, or to other groups of people, please let us know before next week, because we do want to have a timeline of next week to make these dates.
Right. Okay. Anything else about that for now? Okay, so subgroup. So Anula sent out last week some buckets, and in going through those, kind of looking through it myself and then looking through it with Tam, we talked about, is there a way we can kind of narrow down in 1 or 2 words these different topics? I'm just pulling it up now to kind of have an easier way to distill down some of the concepts. And Ashley's not able, she's not at her desk now, but I have a Google Doc. Let me just pull it up. And what I'd like to do, if the rest of the group is on board, is just getting some of these things into 1 or 2 words. Let me find the document. So then that way, when we talk about, these will be our subgroups, and then we'll have the document, the Google document, and committee members can go on and sign their names to particular subgroups that they'd like to be a part of. What I would do is, today it would be rough, but I would send it to Ashley so she can kind of make it pretty and share that with the committee so everyone has access to go in and put your names in. I think we'd be able to have that by the latest at Monday, if not tomorrow afternoon. I'll have to check with Ashley. I don't think she can respond right now. But let me just go. So is that clear to everybody? Kind of the goal of kind of breaking things down into simpler, just into 1 or 2 words?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So does anyone else have access right now to that document with the buckets that we got last week?
I'm gonna grab it and I may.
Yeah, I have it, Reggie.
You have it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I could do is start, I just have this spreadsheet up now and just start putting things in. So if folks want to, why don't we start with that document first? And what I got from this, from Anula's, was mental health, training, youth, technology, like I noticed around body cams. And if anyone else is looking at it now, if you're seeing something, please call it out to me so I can just type it in.
Reggie, if I may.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, if I may. I don't know if I'm allowed to interject or put anything into this.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Jack.
I'm mostly getting involved with this group because I'm finding a real need for our police department to acknowledge people illegally utilizing accessible parking spaces, especially now around the holidays. I see the abuse constantly and I see it get ignored. And it's disturbing. So accessibility, I use the word accessibility instead of handicapped.
Okay.
I'm talking about parking spaces that are designated for people with disabilities that are being abused.
Okay. All right, I have that note,
So,
Jackie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like there's, when we break these down into buckets, so we have things like training, you know, certain things like community policing, for instance, or community, I don't know what a better word for that is, but I feel
That's
like
good.
as Tamara's been talking about police health and wellness, also just really moving into really working around what a community police force looks like, right? And that also, I guess, I feel like would be where we would put place the conversation that we need to be having with with our officers into a section like that. And I believe that something like what Jackie has brought up would fit into that, because that would kind of move us into this conversation of like, what is it that we need? What is our community asking of our officers? I don't know if I'm really right in that thought, but I would feel like that would kind of go in bucket like that.
I agree, Rachel. Thank you.
So health and wellness, Rachel, I got, and then community policing, and thinking that accessibility would go under that.
Be together. I'm saying that when we're coming down to discussing with the police what their needs are, what our needs are, like I feel like rather than having a separate bucket for like police wellness, like that's all in that same conversation. Like, right, we're narrowing these things down. Am I correct?
We're narrowing down, yes.
So under community policing, it has maybe a bucket, which again, I'm not attached to that exactly. We should then like the bullet around, access and direction for where that focus might go. And then I would assume that it would come back up when we have a mental, I think we should look again, like if we're looking at mental health and those kind of conversations, Tamara, you might be better to speak to that. But I would assume that it would come up around like how our police are supporting our disenfranchised community.
If I may interject on the mental health question on the survey regarding police, as a retired EMT of 20 years, I've dealt with many mental health, they're called MHLs, mental health law. There are times, yes, that we definitely need the police because we EMTs have no way of protecting ourselves. And at times, sadly, people with mental health issues can get quite combative and overpower us at times. It always depends on the approach, but protocol calls for, as I said on my survey, for us to call in police and or them to be there. Locally, we have police that approach a situation softly, but I've worked in bigger areas where I've seen it go awry also.
Can I
just,
speak? Am I allowed? I'm not on the.
Okay, go ahead, Shams.
I'm a severely mentally ill person. I live in Woodstock. I'm schizophrenic. I have 2 children. When the cops have come to get me, to call the ambulance to come get me, I have had an okay experience with them. No one has assaulted me. I have been assaulted by police in the past during mental health episodes. I would ask that, if you're going to talk about how mentally ill people are handled in this community, you speak to the actually mentally ill people instead of taking the advice of people who are in other positions. As someone who is impacted in my life by these decisions, I think there are lots of mentally ill people in this community who would be happy to weigh in on these subjects. I would do much better, for example, if there was a mental health trained person coming in with or without the cops. When you're in that state, I am not dangerous and violent for the most part. Sometimes I am when I'm psychotic. If you have someone in that capacity as a social worker, as a mental health worker, who can come in with a sense of calm, empathy, who is trained to be around people who are mentally ill, maybe someone who has experience in working in the hospitals, who's been around severely mentally ill people and it doesn't freak them out, that would be amazing, especially when kids are in the home, to have someone, having guys come in uniforms with guns at their waist creates a certain kind of feeling, as well as instilling fear in someone who's having a mental health episode. When you're already paranoid and someone comes into your house with a gun on their waist, that's very scary. So I just wanted to weigh in and say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're exactly right, and I'm speaking. You're exactly right, and I'm speaking as a 20-year retired EMT of not utilizing police because I'm quite aware of exactly what you're saying. However, there are times, and they were very few, luckily for me, that I did need to call police because my life or my partner's life was at threat. However, those were very few times. So I'm in agreement with you. It needs to be approached very calmly without lights and sirens. EMTs do have to wear uniforms. Often I would have to tell my patient, look, I'm not a cop. I'm here to help you. To keep the situation calm is of the utmost important. I'm in agreement with you.
I'd like to mention two things. One of them is that we are working towards creating subcommittees around these subjects. So we will need support of the community. And I really want to name the importance, which we're finding in many spaces throughout other committees as well, the importance for the people who are the vulnerable humans to actually be at the design table. So I really want to make a very strong effort when we reach out to with these committees once they're set up, to really set them up and design them so that the humans that really need what we're working to support are actually part of the design. And I think that's really important. And so as we move into creating these subcommittees, I think it's important that we actually reach out to the community rather than just like put out, something bolster one and be quick about it. Because that's a really important thing, what Shamsi just brought up, to have that voice there of the people who are in need of these changes right here at the bottom of the conversation.
In full agreement.
If I could just say something from the police standpoint, right now with the mental health, transports, we cannot take somebody to the hospital under mental health transport unless a police officer is either, in the ambulance with that individual or following behind. But that when they arrive at the hospital, they want to see a law enforcement member, with the responding ambulance. A lot of times we do it, transport by police vehicle. So, unless a situation changes, and mental health people can make a transport, law enforcement is required to proceed, in a transport process, either in the ambulance or directly behind it.
Chief, didn't that used to be referred to as a 5150?
I'm sorry, what was that again, Jackie?
Didn't that used to be referred to as a 5150?
I'm not sure about a 5150, but it's actually what under the mental health law, it's under the police. When we take them in, it's a 941. You transport. If it's a doctor's order, it's a 945. And I totally agree that if it's mental health people, close by, I mean, we'd certainly like to have them present, but it's not always available, even with a mobile mental health unit.
So there's some things that I've noted in this conversation and also just in other communities and how they're working with this process of police reform and reinvention. And I'm noting that while we are looking at an April, deadline for the resolutions that are necessary, I also am noticing like communities like immediately enacting and moving with what they're hearing from the outer community as they're working in these committees. So for instance, Kingston has already enacted like walking officers. Every officer has 40 minutes a day to walk out and be out on foot and communing with the community. This is happening sort of without like mandate. It's just happening, right? And so as Shamsi mentioned, some of the things that are like really feel dangerous in that situation, it feels like we can talk about it and we like work towards like policy changes, but like immediately we can recognize the things that are being brought to our attention. And one of those things that's being brought to our attention is like simply like the lights flashing. Like, is it possible sometimes and ever to like turn off the lights before rolling up to a house in that situation? That's something that we don't really need to go into a mandated conversation to figure out. That has just been shared with us. Like, that's like a quickie, an immediate solution to at least begin to de-escalate a situation. As well, the idea of officers coming in with their guns showing. All of these things, which we will begin to talk more as we move into like actual community policing conversations. But these are things that I'm hoping, as you're moving through these conversations with us, Chief, that they're kind of like lighting up spaces for you that you are noting that could be like immediately shifted and supported without us having to tell you to do it or to make policy changes. And so these are the kind of things I'm hoping, as we're working through these conversations, are igniting within just like the natural shift in cultural and dynamics around how the police move through the community.
I hear what you're saying. You just understand it's a big township, and and we only have 2 officers on on a shift. We don't have half a dozen 10 officers. I mean, so we are restricted because of that. And we have to be fair to our entire township. We like to have coverage throughout the entire town. I mean, we have citizens and taxpayers. What 77 square miles here. So it's a big town, and when you really look at from boundary of down to Xena all the way out to Mount Tremper.
So what does that have to do with turning off the lights when you pull up to the house on a mental health call?
I'd like to interrupt this. This is more what we'd like to do when we break up into smaller groups, and we haven't gone through all the different possible groupings yet. So if we as a committee could first make these buckets or make these designations, and then as groups decide how we're going to proceed in our smaller groups, focusing on particular things.
Yes, I just needed to call that out because it was like such an easy, tiny thing that was getting looked over, and I think it's a major one that I really
Rachel, if I may, most definitely on any MHL call I've gone on, you most certainly, if you have to dispatch, can ask for them to show up without lights and sirens. I would never do that on an MHL call. So it can be done.
So that's something that our small groups can determine what policies already exists, whether it's adhered to or not. Those are other things. And then what recommendations we want to make going forward from there.
So at the same time, Woodstock Police Department deserves kudos too. They've been there before the ambulance and have been known to reverse what's called a reversal, meaning someone's been dead and unresponsive, and Woodstock Police have been able to do a reversal, bring that person back to life. So we do need them innumerable times to assist us on EMS calls.
Thank you, Jackie.
So let's getting back to Anula's form and just seeing if there's anything else to add. Cultural change is up here, and there's another section that says education. I would think that would be, do folks agree that cultural change and education might fall under the same kind of bucket, or because it says here how to address masculinity, systemic racism, etc.
Right, so that all fits into cultural change, and I think education, I really felt that Anula is holding very strongly, and to actually like working around education of the youth and the community. I think that's what that bucket actually is. I don't believe it's like training, which I think cultural change and training might be different, and I'm not sure where we'll fit those buckets around like working in that way, but I'm pretty sure that education fell under like working to create programs for youth, and so I would probably maybe put the education into that youth bucket.
Okay.
Again, like these, I'm not attached, I'm just thinking into how we can sort of like consolidate some of this as well as tighten the title.
And then once the document is sent out to the committee, and then we can go in, and I believe, and Ashley, I don't know if you can speak or put some in the chat, but I believe we'll be able to make comments and suggestions as a group to go in and say, what about moving this here or there?
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Google Docs, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're working to like at the top of a split document and you're just taking these like what she has there and just making it like working at the top of it and making those buckets at the top so that whatever she's got
Yeah.
written, they have written there is there.
Yeah.
That document they can all go back. Like Vanya, whoever
Right.
hasn't seen it can go in and knowing that we're this isn't something solid, this is just
Right.
everybody work on it.
This is a working document. Who was it that said they were looking at this document also? Was it John that said you were looking at the buckets list?
Yeah, I have it here.
And anyone else, or is John the only one other than myself?
I have it.
You have it. Okay, so please tell me if there's anything I'm missing that's in that. Please let me know.
Will you read off what you have, Reggie?
Yes. Accountability, training, mental health, education, technology, health and wellness, community policing, youth. And then under community policing, I have accessibility.
Thank you.
Is there anything else?
I'm feeling like we might need like this. That's a lot of buckets, although the buckets necessarily need to become subcommittees because some of those buckets will be mixed together, right?
Yeah.
But because we have those out there now, we can really look because as we're coming through, as we're looking through this document, we can put things into those buckets, and those buckets, as we all come together, again, we can form what get a little closer toward what the subcommittees need to be, because hopefully we could end up working with more like 3 versus 7 or 8 committees, depending on what we really see as standing out.
Right. And then also, like, let's say, if when we're done with this, let's say we have 12 buckets, right? Everybody we may have one bucket that no one maybe signs up for to say, okay, I'm going to take this on. It still can be something that, as this work continues on beyond our work in wrapping up in April, that it can be picked up and it can be clear for the next group or whoever's in that next committee that says, okay, here's something that we've identified, that this committee identified as something to dig deeper in. So it may not be that we address every single one together.
I also think when I look at that and I go, okay, like as you're talking, I still break that down into like 3 or 4 buckets. Again, once we're all together, we'll probably be able to hone it down a little tighter.
Yeah.
I wonder if we might actually create, before quote unquote disbanding, an actual moving forward committee, so that there is a holding, like a container and in some of these things, we may not be able to address them yet, like looking at, I know that in the survey, there seemed to be a real high priority around outfitting the police with gear. Like that to me feels like an extra subcommittee that would be continuing part of the moving forward committee versus like outfitting the police with gear or recommending we do that right away because we really don't have a lot of time to get to that place yet.
Right.
So I feel like we're gonna end up looking at these buckets, and as we're gonna be looking at them for this conversation, but then like pulling them all into a continuing conversation.
Yeah.
I think that some of these things we may, as they say in the, consultant world, like put it in the parking lot.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying is that some of the things that maybe we may not as a committee be able to tackle or start to unpack that moving forward, that we can still have it and have suggestions for whoever's in this next group.
Right.
Like, hey, here's the issue that we, wanted to dig into and we weren't able to, but we encourage you to consider this, or however you want to, put it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just naming my feelings on the importance of establishing that further and continuing group before we disband this committee, or if this committee disbands or whatever that looks like.
Well, I think we will be able to make recommendations. I don't think we can decide. That's something that really is in Bill's hands as a supervisor, but we can certainly make recommendations to him and talk to him about it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so anything else that anyone thinks maybe is on that document or that you want to consider as a bucket?
In the cultural shift, you're looking at the systemic, socioeconomic, right? That's where that's
Yeah,
all.
so actually I'm gonna add that now, cultural, we wanna say cultural change or cultural shifts?
What cultural, it was like cultural something.
It was in the document, it was like cultural change, but we could say call it change, call it shift.
Yeah, whatever that bucket is, whatever it's called.
Okay.
That socioeconomic, racial equity, community equity, like these kind of conversations, because again, these are things that in that cultural change, which I'm seeing the policing, again, what we're finding is that issues that are coming up within the police department are pointing back out to wider cultural change within the community, but also within within our force.
Okay. So I've got it I've just put cultural shifts.
Yeah. Class disparity.
What? Disparity?
Class
Class disparity.
Yeah. Socioeconomic, class, race, gender, all of these are part of that cultural shift.
And I see there's a kind of an overlay between this and implicit bias and the importance of training. And when I brought up last time cultural change, I was referring to the fact that it's one of the most difficult things to change, and it takes repetition, practice, psychoeducation, reminders about it, and a once a year training is not sufficient. So when I look at how do we change culture, I want to look at the dynamics of the process that best aids that shift and change. But as we were talking here today, I think that change falls into all of these buckets, really. So for me, it's what supports that change? What helps to create that change and keep the momentum going? And what are the different components of that?
Yeah, and I feel like part of that, in my mind, and I have a bit of a problem because I have this like wide scope and then I'm detailed and then really, really wide.
You do, we're bringing you in though.
But when I see that though, like I think, okay, so training and cultural shift, like that kind of they're together because that's kind of where that all begins to, right?
Yeah.
But then we also have these other places where it's all coming in. But I think that we're going to find a lot of that in the community policing, because I think if we actually have a bucket that is focused around community policing, that I think that's the best community, relations, whatever you want to call that, like inter community relations, because there's a lot that our officers really need. And there's a lot that we really need from and with the officers. It's like a super, that particular bucket is like an extremely active, and it's an interdependent and very connected, because they need that conversation around community policing. It's important for us to be supporting our police in that process too. And so I think that the community policing and the training might end up really working together.
Yeah, I think a lot of these will, and I'm going to do the unpopular part of my job and keep focusing us in and moving us forward on the agenda. So we are at the place of discussing, I think, group membership for the subgroups. And we wanted to have a conversation about the makeup of those groups. So how do people feel about the process that we're going to get group members? Should we limit group members? How do we do that? You, Rachel, had brought up that each group, in your opinion, needs to have somebody with lived experience active on that subgroup. So how are we going to do that? How are those groups going to function? What kind of leadership will they have? What kind of decision-making process? And also, what are the expectations? If we take in people who are not part of this committee, that's a different set of subgroup expectations that we just want to have an agreement on and make clear to people.
I feel like because we have come to some agreements and some committee agreements here that it shouldn't be too hard to try to bring those into those subcommittees, like so that there is scaffolds around that. That's like a first thing that comes to mind. I also feel like, an odd number and probably not too many people on particular committees that are in. But again, I mean, when we sit down and say, hey, we're looking at cultural change, like if I were to build a committee like that, I would be looking for people that are, that really have reference within that space and also have the capacity to work within a committee in that way. Like if I were to make a suggestion, say, right? It would be, I would be looking in building that committee to say, okay, we're looking at socioeconomic, we're looking at like cultural shift. So like who in our community that may be available, again, yes, putting it out to the community, so we can't decide who's ready and willing and able if we haven't asked everybody. But I think really trying to look at how we cover those bases when we build those subcommittees is really important, right? So like there are people who are very much more versed in conversations around gender identity and heteronormative conversations, right? We need to be having those conversations as we're working towards cultural shift to learn, so that we know that our officers are, coming into contact in terms with those on a visceral level. So I'm just thinking in those kind of ways where as we build these, to really think about supporting as much as we can as we, invite people into those spaces.
And I hear what you're saying, Rachel, and I would offset that with our need to get this done sooner rather than later. And
Yeah.
The composition of the subgroups can certainly reach out to consultants of all kinds for information and guidance, and we can do that as well. I'm not sure how long we have to make these subgroups so that the group itself can begin to look at things.
Yeah, I get that. I also get that as we do it, it's very important. Like I'm looking right now at Woodstock's housing committee, an entire white committee.
And your point that you keep coming back to, that this is a process that's going to go on for a while, is something that we should all keep into mind, that we're going to have to look at how do we make recommendations in a shorter period of time and include in those recommendations things that need a longer time frame. Cultural considerations for me is one of those things that needs a much longer time frame than Absolutely. We're going to be able to do in a short period. But how do we arrive at our committees, a composition of those committees, the expectations around them, and get them moving so that by March we're in a place where we can begin to make these recommendations to the board?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're muted, Reggie, if you're talking to us.
Okay, sorry. In thinking about membership, then it sounds like we're open to either reaching out to the community. I mean, however folks decide, if like you're gonna say, okay, I'm interested in chairing or leading this subgroup, then however you want to, whoever you want to go to for feedback or information or thoughts or ideas, that's kind of an open-ended possibility. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that each group should make that determination on their own?
Well, I'm asking. I mean, do we want to, or are we? Yeah, I'm actually asking everybody.
Wait, I just need a little clarity on that question. You mean that we would that each committee has its capacity to reach out to different community organizations or community leaders or whatever in order to? Yeah. But all I'm saying, I'm not trying to make like a big deal out of this at all. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, I don't think you are.
I really hope that we can, once we have these committees, really be able to jump into a space where we're actually placing them with contexted humans. That's all. And I think it is possible.
Yes, no,
Absolutely.
yes,
Point of
Yeah.
time.
I agree. I agree. Okay. So Tam, we should probably move on to SMART goals, which, unless anyone else has anything to add about.
Reg,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to call one
Go ahead.
one quick thing I just wanted to say, which was, like already, you know, I'm like, oh, I want to participate in that committee, and I want to participate, and obviously that's not happening. But will we, as a
Right.
committee? There's two things that I wanted to say about that. Accessibility, like if committees need to function in executive committee, obviously that is necessary, but I really want to keep the transparency. And so I'm wondering about how these subcommittees can function in an open way, the way we've been able to do, because I feel like this committee has really held our end up on at least showing up and being like publicly available with our meetings. You know, available afterwards and going onto the YouTube page. Like, I really would like to bring that into the subcommittees. And I know that might be a lot on the Zoom and timing and all of that, but I just wanted to just note that. And I do have Zoom that can be useful for one of those subcommittees if we're clogged up. But I really wanted to make that accessible because I feel like I'm watching like a lot of inaccessibility in the housing committee that's making me want to cry. Like it's really upsetting. So I don't want to be that committee.
I mean, I'm thinking. Go ahead, Tam. You thought you were going to say something. Go ahead.
I was going to say a couple of things. One is I'm really sorry that we're operating under a pandemic and in as much isolation as we already are, because I do, Rachel, think it impacts this process in a way that we're not going to be able to really control for, and that's a bummer. And also, what you had to say just really made me wonder if there's a place for presentations of each committee's work to the community somewhere down the line. I don't know what the timeline yet for that would be, but certainly that's part of the governor's mandate, that we be able to have open forums before we make the official recommendations to the town board so that we get community feedback. So all of us being mindful as we go forward that that's going to be part of this process as well.
Yeah, and I really feel like I feel like that's crucial, and so
yeah,
that's part of why I want to keep the openness as we're going, as we have been. And I think in a lot of ways too, like it's hard to get the word out to people, but it's also been like really helpful to have the Zoom because we've all been able to be here, we've been able to all show up. And so I feel like if we, you know, have the time and continue to, you know, really work towards getting out to the community, that there will be ways that we can do it. And the other thing is that, and I don't mean to keep going back to this, but I'm seeing this like presence of the housing committee on Facebook. It's a page. And there's a very big difference between a page and a group. A group allows people to converse, to post what they're feeling, to bring things up. It's like a community forum. A page separates everyone into comments, right? But I'm thinking about that as like where and how do we have the capacity to create a forum? And the Facebook page is kind of annoying, but it is there. And I mean group. And so I'm really interested in that too as we move out into this. If we start this conversation now, we won't just be showing up like as a group to the community. We won't just be showing up like, hey, you guys, fill out this form. And yes, we did all this stuff. Go back and catch up. Like the quicker we catch people up now, I think the better. So I just wanted to bring that in as far as my feeling on the importance of really outreaching to the community. And I think we can do it quick.
I mean, I think one challenge is going to be, I think Tim and I talked about this maybe last week, but we could still have this time available from 4 to 5:30 and have Ashley available to host for whatever subgroups may want to use that time. The challenge is if she's going to be our host, and I can get some clarity from her when she can talk a little more, to find out, like if we have, let's say, I don't know, let's say we get 7 buckets, right? You know, obviously we can't have them all and have every subgroup meet at the same time because Ashley can only host kind of one meeting. So I think the trickiness of trying to figure that out, that's where when we talk about like, are we going to record, every single subgroup, right? So that's one thing that I think about just off the top of my head is making sure we have someone that can actually, make it available. And then that's also a thing of how many different links is that, it just could be it could be tricky. But I do understand what you're saying about having, feedback during the creation of the proposals and hearing from people.
And not just feedback, actually. No, I'm not just talking about feedback. I'm talking
Not
about
just feedback, but actually
on the committee. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes, and I get what you're saying. Like we could effectively, we could come in at this 4:30 time if that was working for subcommittees, and just go into breakout rooms and be there. And if we were to have really good note takers that were able to like really pull in the notes, we can, we could do it that way.
Yep.
And and again, like we do have the platform and the capacity to be able to have and ask every subcommittee to write up a little, post meeting follow up. Here's where we're at. Send it into the committee. Send it to the community availability or whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another way to kind of mitigate some of that and try to keep it in a tighter container for Ashley, so she's not just off the chain trying to follow.
Right. I definitely think, sharing with each other, checking in with each other once we have broken up into subgroups will be important for feedback and saying, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what our group is thinking. What are your thoughts? Is important.
Mm-hmm.
Just really quickly on the quickness, are there groups, subcommittees that people are already thinking about?
If I may, I have much ADA history and advocation, and also I graduated the Albany Police Citizens, and I can offer EMS and how it works. Those three are my fortes. So whatever I can offer in either or all three, I'm willing to.
Thank you,
Jack. Having you step in now, just being part of, joining the conversation is definitely a help, and hopefully you do have the capacity to maybe jump onto one of those committees or, pay attention anyway, jump in if there's a desire for you to follow along, because it's important to have that context.
And let me just get Jackie again what those three was. EMS, go ahead.
What? I'm sorry, I missed it.
The three areas that you mentioned, I just wanted to write that down. EMS?
Yes, EMS,
mm-hmm.
disability advocate, and I created Project Access in Albany when Sheriff Campbell was in office.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I just kind of lost my little my train of thought here.
Yeah, we can move on. I was just wondering if anybody was feeling any.
Right. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, Tam.
So let me talk a little bit about SMART goals and how to utilize those to making recommendations. Again, many of us are really broad thinkers, and we need to narrow our focus for this specific mandate and our responsibilities. So I wanted to bring up SMART goals as one model that we could use as we begin to sort through these buckets and all the different information that we're going to be compiling to come up with a recommendation. So SMART goals are something that's often used, and SMART in this case stands for specific. So we have to be very specific in the recommendations we're making. Whatever we're recommending it's advisable that there be a way to measure the outcome of that. So it needs to be measurable. It needs to be achievable. So again, Chief, you've brought up many times some of the parameters that the town of Woodstock is working under. Some of that is state law, some of that's county law, some of that are new mandates coming from the sheriff's department, some of that's finances. So we have to take all that into account, and are the recommendations we're making, the immediate ones, the ones on the short term, achievable? Are they relevant to the information that we've gathered, to to where we come as committee members to focus on the issues that we bring to this? And are they relevant to the governor's mandate? And they need to be time bound. So again, we're looking at short-term recommendations, and then going back to what keeps coming up is the long-term process here. And so they can be, our initial ones need to be time bound, and then we can look beyond that to what's the longer range of goals, medium goals, long-term goals that we're looking at for Woodstock and this initiative. So SMART goals, specific, measurable. How will we know that our recommendations, if they're put into practice, have the desired outcomes? Are they achievable? So have we taken into consideration all the different pieces that go into this? Are they relevant to the mission, and are they time bound? So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that before we start to meet together as small groups, because it is difficult to rein this back into a more narrowly focused mandate, to look at this in specific and have some recommendations around this for our community.
Thank you, Tam. Go ahead.
Absolutely agreed. I agree, and I thank you for that.
Yes.
And I also want to say that I feel like I would like to, maybe when we're all together as a group again, like really take a moment to assess like what the governor's mandate, what parts of the governor's mandate, what of the governor's mandate are we following, and what are we looking to, because that I think is a really big important thing as we really do set these SMART goals as we're working forward. Like what are we looking, what is the actual mandate? Are we all on board? Because we never all together sat and went through this mandate and identified it, and we've had some issues around what we're supposed to be paying attention to, right? So I feel like as a group it might be good, as we're coming to looking at these next committees, to really identify as a group what we believe this mandate to be.
Maybe I think I've said this before. My favorite part was the first part, the longer part that really looks at all the different components of this and the things that major social movements are asking us to look at right now. And my least favorite part was the second part, which is much shorter and much more structure bound and concrete. And for me, I'd much rather get into the first part, because that's where my heart is. I've looked a few times at the second part, which really lays out the responsibilities of the committee. So that's one thing to keep in mind when we're grappling with this. What is the second part of this that gives us the timeline, asks us not for specific things, but to take what our assessment of the community is, their issues, and start to make recommendations around that, while also remembering that these larger issues and movements are something that we're going to be embracing for a really long time.
Right, and so as these movements have been asking us, you're saying that you want to look at the beginning, which is like what the movements and what's been happening around the country and what's been asked of us. Except for that, we just put out a survey that asked none of that.
Well, we can't go back to that, Rach.
I understand. So how do we move with what we have asked of the community and move into addressing what the governor's asked us to address, while we haven't actually done that? And so now we have to retrofit, which is, again, like that's the biggest problem of systemic issues raging throughout this country, is that you cannot retrofit socioeconomically disenfranchised, class disenfranchised, racially disenfranchised, gender disenfranchised humans into a box. You can't retrofit them into a design that was designed to erase us. And so since we have so far erased those questions from our questions to the community, and now we want to refocus upon those questions, how are we going to use the survey from the community where we've asked not a single one of those questions, how are we going to use that survey to address the issues that are, I know very dear to you, Tamara, because this is what you do as a life choice, as a
Yes.
ride or die. You're not an outlaw, you're a ride or die. I consider you
Yes.
a ride or die. And I know this has been something you've been holding to. So how do we actually take this now and do this? Because we're doing exactly what all the movements have asked us not to do.
And that's what I'm saying about culture change. And I appreciate that you keep bringing us back here, Rachel. That's what I'm saying about culture change. It is difficult to grapple with. It's difficult to understand. It's so easy to catch yourself. It's easy for me to catch myself in my white supremacy upbringing. It's also really easy for me to see where, as a woman, I'm considered to be less than. And I think we have intersectionalities that happen all the time. We can't go back and redo something that we've already done. What we can do is begin to look at, and you may have other ideas as well as other people on the call, how do we now capture those things, and how do we remember going forward that it's easy to mess up here, that it's easy to forget, because that's what cultural conditioning does. That's what oppressive patterns do. They make us forget. They're persistent. They confuse us. They have basic characteristics that overlap amongst oppression issues. So I'm sorry, I'm going off on all kinds of stuff here that really has nothing to do so much with this committee. But yes, it is near and dear to my heart. So how do we do that now, knowing that this is not easy work for any of us? As well-intentioned as I am, I make a ton of mistakes.
And I think they can still, even once in the subgroups, that those things can come up, like wherever anyone feels like the mark was missed with the survey, that there's still opportunity, like where, Shamsi and Rachel talked about around mental health, about still reaching out to those folks, or reaching out to people that you feel like or you believe were left out, or anyone believes were left out of the survey, to still seek that knowledge out. So the opportunity is still there, I believe.
Yes, and what I just want to say, and I because I work, I know that I was introduced to this group as Woodstock's environmental brown person, but like what I do in my work outside of this community is decolonization of like so many different levels of systems, and I work in spaces with like so many, like I'm so still catching up, right? We're all just catching up in these places, but I work in these spaces where trust is like really, really difficult for people to embrace and step into in and around these conversations. As you all know, like everyone's worried and has a difficult time with trusting me within this conversation, because I've been brought to situations which are systemically placed to where I was like, it was like so typical, right? I could use these videos for like workshop presentations to show people how these issues come up within committees, within communities, and how do we bring these in, how do we actually include the community? And I work in spaces where I'm constantly people ask me questions regularly, like, how do we include more brown people? How do we include more young people? How do we, and the reality is like, if you don't include them at the baseline, then they don't necessarily feel it and give us voice, right? Women, children, then we don't actually feel safe to come into these circles and speak them. I happen to have spent my life working really, really hard. Like, I'm like bombastically like, hey, you guys, I'm here. And so I have the ability to step into this circle and hold myself in ways, because I'm like, I do lead circles like this on a regular basis. And so for me, it's not that difficult to step into them and say, hey, wait, chief, no, call that out. But for other people, it's not. And so if the more inclusive and the more available and the more transparent and the more inviting we are from the get-go, the more real answers we're going to get. And when someone looks at a questionnaire and says, I can't even answer these questions, I'm not going to bother, like, we're not doing a good enough job. And so I'm not saying we're doing a bad job, but I'm saying this is a really important time and place where we have to step off of like everything that we think we know as we move into this, because we can make change, and it doesn't have to be like 2 steps backwards, half a step forward. So that's where I'm going, okay, like, we're going to take this, but like, what part of the mandate are we really focusing on? Are we focusing on supporting the police and making the cultural shift? Because when I read the front of the governor's thing, I was like, wow, this governor, this is the first time I've actually cheered him, and I've been fighting him for 6 years. So I just want to circle back before we move into breaking out into these committees with the committee, and just like maybe even just read that first, the letter to the police. Actually, there's several different documents that are out there. The mandate itself, there's the work book that's 140 pages long, and there's also the letter to the police chiefs of every municipality. They got that same letter, and each one of those speaks to the issue in some way. And so I just want to circle us back, whether we read through the mandate together, whatever that is, and then move into those SMART goals as a committee.
So is that something you're suggesting that we do next week, Rachel, as we make some attempt, each of us, it sounds like, because we each read this our own way.
No. I mean, together as a committee, read it. Not everybody go home and read it and then come back. But actually, it's not that long. The mandate itself is only like 10 or 15 lines.
Mm-hmm.
You can put those up, read them, and then have a short discussion, 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want to have around that. But to really just circle ourselves back to the mandate, and then
this one you're talking about? This one? Can you see it, Rach?
Yeah, what are you looking at? The actual
Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative.
That whole document.
It's 131 pages.
Document?
Yeah, it's 131.
No, that's the guidelines. There's an actual mandate. I can send you the link to it. It's like the whereas and whereas.
Yeah, that's
in there.
That's the second half. That's what I was talking about before.
Well, the second half, the 140-page document is the guidelines to the mandate itself. And the mandate itself is like a one-pager, and it's like, whereas Black Lives Matter, whereas we're dealing with, whereas police need this, whereas if you want your money, you got to do that. That document right there is the mandate that we're working with. So I want to sit down with this committee, because we've never done it, and look at that mandate. It's really short. And just go, this is the mandate. Let's address our SMART goals, and then move into working these committees down.
Okay, you're talking about Appendix A, the executive order, and it's all the whereases.
Yes, there's an executive order.
Yeah, it's page 112 in that document, and it goes through page 115. So yeah, we could. That's a possibility.
I believe I have it right here, and I can give you the exact link.
Okay.
And he wrote a letter to the police chiefs. That's a separate letter. And that's also not as long. And that's where the last paragraph of our survey came from. It was like the last, was one of the paragraphs in the chief's letter is where that verbiage came from. I have that too. But I will share with you the actual mandate. The executive orders right here. So if we can just together look at that and go, okay, what are SMART goals? Because I think you're absolutely right. We need to be very clear. What are we looking to accomplish here? What are the recommendations we're reaching for? Are we reaching to recommend that, the police take a little more time and address this, or this happen, whatever that is? I think it's really important that we come to that. And I can share the link right now to that here in the chat, and everybody can copy it, take it home, and read it alone, but then like, let's come back together and look at it, because the community may not have seen that either. Read out. But I think it'll help us like recenter ourselves in the ask.
I think, yeah, that letter is at the beginning of this guide that we all got. And it is, yeah, and it is what you and I went over when we were looking at this initially back in the fall.
Which the beginning May 25th, following police involved death of George, here's what happens.
Yep.
Yeah, this was the this was that, yes, that's the governor, and then there's a letter, a direct letter to the police chiefs. And so those are the two things that I wanted to look over, and they're not that long. They're not
Okay.
100 pages.
Let's put it on next week's agenda and we'll do that. Is anybody in objection to that? This shouldn't be a decision that Rachel and I make.
I'm fine with that.
Chief, is that okay with you? Yeah. Jonathan?
John
That's
had
good.
to, he had a legislative
he had
meeting.
to-
He had to get
okay.
off the call at 5.
Okay. And then we have Anula and
Vanya.
Vanya and all other people on the meeting today are welcome to be part of that as well. And Rachel did share the link, so if you don't have a copy of the mandate, you can get that information.
Find the letter to the police chiefs, hopefully before we're done here.
Okay.
Let's see.
Ooh.
We already discussed presentation. We talked about a date, which we will nail that down for next week. In the meantime, I'll talk to Bill and Ashley to look at the town calendar. And it sounds like, Bill put out January 12th as a date, and we'll see. And I'd like to talk to him about some alternative dates to send out to the committee through a doodle poll, just again to make sure that the majority of the committee can be there. I think that's important. And I imagine most everybody, will want to be a part of that.
Yes, and just to say that my Mondays is out for me.
Okay.
Other than that, I can make space.
Okay. Anyone else just, we can, I know just off the top of your head, like, hey, this day is terrible.
Sham, so you, go ahead.
Hi, sorry to interrupt. Is there any way that I can find out about when the next one is scheduled? Because it sounds like you're not doing that at this time, right at this moment. Is there anywhere that I can go on the internet and find out when the next one is?
The next meeting of this group?
Yep.
We will be
We're
here.
meeting next week. Same
It's
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just looking at creating a date that we make a presentation to the community with what we're working towards. That'll be coming in January.
Right.
So we're just talking about that.
Right.
Thank you.
And we do have 2 holidays coming up on Thursdays. We have Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So we'll decide next week about what people want to do as far as those meetings. If we have decided what our small group meetings are by then, we could meet at alternative times as groups, although we have discussed just leaving this open, although Ashley may or may not be working at 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So we can talk about alternatives to that. One thing I had raised early on was whether we could use our own Zooms or I could use Families WebEx series to hold meetings. And I don't know what the town's position is on that. I know, Rachel, you said that you had an alternative Zoom that people could use as well. So if we could find out, Reggie, from Bill, whether we can use our own sources for Zoom-like meetings for our subcommittees. Although Rachel did have a good point about breakout rooms at this time, but some of us might also want to meet at different times. So
Okay.
what are the guidelines from the town on that?
Around holding our own Zoom meetings.
And whether we have to record that or not, I don't know if that's an issue of transparency or if it's an official town policy that we record it.
Okay, I'll find out. Okay. All right, so I think that for today, that's everything on the agenda. Then Rachel just put in the letter to the chiefs, and right, and there's the whole document, a link to that. Thank you.
Yeah, the link there is there's two there. One is the executive order and the other is the letter to the chiefs. It sort of like summarizes it, but if you scroll down, you see the letter to the chiefs there.
Yep, I see it.
That whole letter is right there. And I just want to look at those two.
Okay. Thank you.
And Chief, do you have anything that you'd like to say or add or ask of us?
Nope, I'm just glad that we're moving forwards.
I know you are.
Awesome.
So-
And I one question, which was how are the officers relating to this conversation?
Is that a question for the chief, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Okay, just repeat that again, Rachel.
How are the officers relating to this conversation, like in debrief?
To this conversation.
Yeah, to the Police Reform and Reinvention Committee meetings as we've been going since September.
Other than Rob, I don't know if the other officers have even reviewed the meetings.
Okay.
And I'll just say my experience, even just being at the station, working on some of this stuff, has been officers I've come in contact with are saying like, hey, we want to do what we can to be better and serve the community. That's the impression that I've been getting from at least a few of the officers that I've just engaged with throughout this process. I would say overall, and I certainly can't speak for everyone or can't, but I can say my impression from our officers has been an openness and a willingness to say, what can we do? Like we're here. What can we do?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the community policing committee because I think that'll be where we'll get to speak to them and just get a feel for how they're doing and what's happening for them.
Agreed. All right, everybody. So unless anyone has anything else, we're coming up on time here. I will work with Ashley on getting that Google Doc together that everyone can see and make either, make comments or suggestions or maybe add buckets. And our next meeting will be next Thursday at 4 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Stay healthy and safe.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jackie and Steph.
Yes.
Awesome.
Bye, Sham.
Sham, Jackie, thank you.
It says Sham.
And thank you all for letting us record this for use. Thank
Felicia,
you. Good night.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. And just if you want to let anybody know, which a lot of people, Jacqueline, if you're still there, I know people aren't online. Next week, I will be airing this meeting on my radio show on
the
Monday
same boat, right?
Between 5 and 7. So I'll start it at 5:30 and let it go from there so that people can have that access as well.
It's called the same boat, right?
It's called Boat from 5 to 7 on 104.1. It's actually a community radio station that people don't all know about, but we do actually air emergency broadcast and support in that way as well, and also air the town meetings. So that's Monday nights between 5 and 7, and I'll be airing this meeting, the previous week's meeting, each week.
And it is not available on the internet, right, Rachel?
Nope, it's not an internet-based station. Okay. It's all only on the dial. That's why I want to be able to provide that, because there's actually a lot of people in the community who don't be on the web, and some of them don't even have telephones. I've had people stop me and tell me to listen to the show, and they don't even have a phone, but they listen to.
I ran into someone at Cumbies this week who said they had just listened to the town board meeting on the radio station.
Yeah, it's a great station.
Yeah, I got a call from someone saying, "You're on the radio," and I said, "What?"
Right.
It was your show.
The number one
But
hit
I don't
song.
have a dial. I have to get a radio. But
Gotta get
anyway,
a radio. All right, everybody. Good night.
thanks everyone. Good
Thank you.
job.
And thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Bye.
Chief,
Good night,
Chief,
and thank you.
Chief,
Yes.
Chief,
Chief?
Chief, thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Same to you, Jackie. Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you for
Bye.
letting me join in.
Well, of course, you're welcome.
Be well, everybody.